Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Negotiating Rent Relief webinar. My name is Rebecca Ganikoch, Business Engagement Officer for the City of Whittlesea, and I'll be your host this afternoon. On behalf of the City of Whittlesea, I recognise the rich Aboriginal heritage of this country and acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung clan as the traditional owners of this place. I'd like to now invite City of Whittlesea Administrator, the Honourable Bruce Bilson, to say a few words.
Rebecca, thank you so much, and hello to all of the participants in today's webinar. My name's Bruce Bilson. I'm one of the three panel of administrators that's been appointed by the state government to function effectively as the council for the City of Whittlesea for the next 4 years. It's my first chance to speak with you, but you've been very much in my thoughts and very much before the front of mind of our panel. The small business community, the medium-sized enterprises, all of those enterprising men and women that provide livelihood opportunities for our residents and within the City of Whittlesea are very much the forefront of our thinking. We want to see you thrive and prosper. We know a rounded life includes a chance for a livelihood, and we'd love more of those opportunities to be in the City of Whittlesea. We've just in the last week allocated $500,000 as part of our business recovery and support measures program to help the business community navigate COVID, to find ways of engaging with their markets, find ways of staying in front of what has been a tumultuous time for many small business owners. So that, along with measures to revitalise some of our strip shopping centres and a number of other initiatives, is really our way of saying we really value and thank you for all you do for the City of Whittlesea, our community and its citizens. You've also let us know that there's some challenges there that you're facing. We as a municipal council aren't able to solve all of those challenges, but what we can do is bring good work like that led by Rebecca into bringing the people to you that can really help. That's why I'm delighted today to introduce my friend, a long-time colleague, and now the current Victorian Small Business Commissioner, Judy O'Connell. Judy's going to step us through the Negotiating Rent Relief webinar for today and also point to the wonderful resource that the Victorian Small Business Commission is for small business men and women for a whole range of challenges they may face. We value your participation in these webinars. We're delighted that so many of you have taken up mentoring opportunities that we've provided. And I hope you can see very tangible action from the council, from some of the initiatives I already mentioned, to let you know we are very much thinking of you, trying to support your success as best we can as a council, and to show that we value your contribution to the City of Whittlesea. I hope you get much out of today's webinar, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Administrator. To the attendees, we may have met during previous face-to-face economic development business support events over the years, which I very much look forward to hosting again in the future. Nevertheless, despite the current situation, the City of Whittlesea is proud to offer this series of webinars to support your growth during this period. You will note that you can submit any questions you have via the Q&A function to the right of your screen. They will be assessed and posted to the Q&A listing for our presenter to answer during the last 15 minutes of the session. Please understand that any questions not answered will be followed up after the event through the most appropriate channels. Also, a reminder that this webinar will be recorded and will be made available on Council's YouTube channel within a few days. So without further ado, I'll now pass you on to our presenter. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks you very much, Rebecca, and thank you, Bruce, for those kind words. And thank you all for attending today. I just want to acknowledge the situation at the moment and the tough time that especially our small and medium businesses are facing at the moment. And today, hopefully, I can provide some sort of support for you in terms of negotiating rent relief. If you just bear with me for a minute, and I will start to look at getting my presentation up. So I hope that's up now. So Rebecca, just give me a thumbs up if it's up on the screen.
That looks good.
Great, excellent. All right. So just a bit about what the Victorian Small Business Commission is. We're an independent government agency set up to make sure that there's a level playing field for small businesses. And how we do that is really to advocate on issues that are impacting a large number of small businesses. And we've done a fair bit in terms of payment terms and making sure small businesses get paid on time and in a timely manner. And it's great to see the Victorian government is paying within 10 days during this pandemic, and that the federal government actually announced just yesterday that all of those large businesses over $100 million will now have to report their times of paying small business. So we do a lot of advocacy work. We also have a small business friendly council, which we shall see is one of our small business friendly councils. So we work very closely with the council as well to share information and to find out what the key issues are. And the Victorian Small Business Commission also has a dispute resolution service. So what this means is any dispute that you might have with another business or with a government agency, you can come to us and we will try and help you to resolve it. So it really keeps it out of the court system and it makes it affordable for you actually to be able to resolve commercial business disputes. We don't have a definition of small business, so if you think you're small, then you can come to us. So last year we actually helped over 14,000 small business owners with their inquiries. So on our phone and email inquiry line, we usually get a lot of calls about, you know, I'm just about to sign this contract and I'm not quite sure what this clause means. Can you please advise me? Which of course we provide guidance on what to do when you do get into a dispute situation, and of course more recently, how do I start negotiations of rent relief with my landlord. So last year we had over 2,600 dispute applications, and 38% of those were completed without progressing to mediation. And what that means is that the dispute, whether it be, you know, the landlord won't fix the leaky roof, or, you know, I've supplied these goods and services and haven't been paid, or I've bought this franchise and the franchisor hasn't provided the referrals that had been promised. Quite often, and in 38% of cases, just by talking to the other party is enough for them to realise that you're serious about this dispute, and they end up either paying up or fixing that leaky roof. And that is of no cost to either party. We then had 630 mediations where both parties sit down with a mediator, and our mediators are independent, experienced lawyers in the main, often barristers, who will sit both parties down and negotiate an agreed settlement. And 81% of those were successful last year. So once it comes to us, we do have quite a good success rate. And prior to COVID, it was only $195 each party to go to mediation. Now it's free for any COVID-related disputes. So I'll talk a lot about rent relief in a minute, but I just wanted to, you know, this is probably one of the best kept secrets where people don't realise that they can come to us with any sort of dispute. At the moment, during COVID, we've actually found that we've had an increase in dispute applications for either undelivered goods and services. So for an example, we had a case where a business had ordered all of these face masks from China in 2.5 months and paid up front, and 2.5 months later they were still waiting for them, and we came in and got the money back for the business. The quality of goods and services, so there's been a lot of issues around supply chains and actually being able to get these goods and services, but in some instances the quality isn't there. We had one where somebody had decided to take advantage of closing a restaurant, and they had 30 of their chairs reupholstered. 10 of them look great, the other 20 were a bit dodgy, so when we got involved the upholsterer came back and reupholstered those other 20, so they're all in really good condition. And as I said before, a lot of disputes about non-payment when you have supplied goods or services, and in a lot of instances the other businesses, even large businesses, are struggling with cash flow, and they're using the smaller businesses as a bit of a bank, and we don't think that's on, so we will follow up those as well. But what I'm going to talk most of the time today is about the commercial tenancy relief scheme. So the Victorian government introduced this scheme because of the hardship that was faced by tenants, especially those who had reduced their turnover because they had to go online or just do takeaway or had to close completely. And what it does is it provides a 6-month moratorium on evictions for not paying rent. So if a eligible small business tenant can't pay the rent, they cannot be evicted from their premises. And a freeze on rent increases, so the rent can't increase during this time as well. The rent relief is in the form of either a waiver and a deferral. And a waiver is where you don't have to pay the rent at all ever again. Deferral is when it is deferred and you would have to start paying it back later. And I'll talk a lot more about that in a minute. And also what we're trying to do is encourage landlords and tenants to talk amongst yourselves and be able to negotiate rent relief. However, if you cannot, the VSBC is there to support you, and everything is free. So we will organise free advice and free mediations if required. So I'll talk now that last week the Victorian government announced its extension to extend the scheme until the 31st of December. And so that's going through Parliament at the moment. It also announced that sole traders that participate in JobKeeper will also be eligible. And it has changed, it is intending to change the way that the rent relief is negotiated to be on a proportional basis. At the moment, it doesn't necessarily have to be on a proportional basis, but what that means, if this is all passed, is that if the tenant's turnover has fallen by 40%, compared to that same period in the previous year, then the required rent relief will have to be at least 40% of that rent. So it's proportional to the reduction in your turnover is the amount of rent relief that the landlord is required to give you. There is an intention to give us capacity to order rent relief if the landlord refuses our requests to negotiate rent relief or doesn't do so in good faith. And I won't talk any more about that because it hasn't been enacted yet, and so I'm going to talk about what the scheme is at the moment. And they're the only real differences that will happen with the new scheme. The rest of it will all stay as it is at the moment, is our understanding. So the regulations at the moment relate to the 29th of March to the 29th of September. So you're entitled to rent relief for those 6 months. To participate in the scheme, the tenant has to be participating in JobKeeper, and you'll need the receipt from the ATO. So when you applied for JobKeeper, you would have got an acknowledgement receipt back when you did the application online. If you've kept that, you can send that to your landlord or to the VSBC if needs be. If you haven't kept that, you can contact the ATO and they will provide you with that receipt again. So you will need that receipt to provide it to your landlord. You also need to confirm that you're a small medium enterprise earning a turnover of less than 50 million. So once you've done that, you need to work out what your financial situation is. That's how much your turnover has reduced from the previous year. So you can do that by comparing your actual turnover from April to June quarter with the April and June quarter in 2019, or you can compare the likely turnover from July to September with the actual sales from that quarter in 2019. And the evidence that you need to provide to show that reduction in turnover is either an extract from your accounting software. So if you're using MYOB or Xero, you can use an extract from that, or the BAS statement, or you can get your or the information you provide to the bank, a bank statement, or a letter from your accountant verifying what the reduction in turnover is. We have heard a lot of landlords who are requesting profit and loss sheets and balance sheets for the last 4 years, wanting to know what all your assets are. That's not relevant. The only thing that is relevant here is the turnover, and that's all you need to provide. You don't need to provide the profit and loss, and you don't need to provide the balance sheets. And if a landlord is demanding that sort of information, I suggest you contact the VSBC and we will follow up with that one. So once you've collected all of this information, then you need to make a written request to the landlord. And what we're finding is a lot of tenants are saying, I just don't know how to go about doing that initial letter or written request or email that I've got to send. So now on our website, and there's the link below there, we have a template letter, and all you need to do, you'll see there's all those yellow highlighted bits. All you need to do there is fill in your actual information, so the business name, the dates that you want the rent relief, how much you want what sort of rent relief you're looking for, and then send that to the landlord. And I'll also forward it to Rebecca as well, who so you can have it have the actual letter there if you would like it. We're finding that that's been really valuable. The landlord then has 14 days to make an offer of that rent relief. So when the landlord receives your email, he needs to take into these sort of factors. He needs to take into account the tenant's reduction in turnover, also needs to take into account their landlord's financial capacity. So we have found that the landlord themselves might be a self-funded retiree and might need that rent to actually for them to survive. And so they should take that into account as well. And also whether there's any waiver or reductions of any outgoings. You might have some rates you have to pay, or there might be some essential repairs and maintenance that has to happen, and you can also negotiate a waiver or reduction of those as well. So once the landlord has taken those into account, then they have to offer no less than 50% of the rent relief offer by the landlord must be in the form of a rent waiver. So that's rent that you never have to pay again. And it gets a bit confusing, so I've got a couple of scenarios here. So in this scenario, Joe owns a cafe and he pays $1,000 a month in rent. So Joe's take-ins have reduced by 50%, and so he's requested $500 a month reduction in rent. The landlord's response is, yep, that's fair enough. I will provide you with a $250 a month rent waiver. So that's $250 you don't ever have to pay again. And also $250 a month rent deferral. So that $250 a month accumulates. So for example, if the tenant was requesting rent relief for 4 months, that would be $250 times 4, which equals $1,000. That after September, and probably it will be after December, that the tenant will have to repay. So, but they don't have to repay it all at once, and the landlord and tenant should negotiate a time period to pay it back. You've actually got up to 24 months to pay it back. So if it was $1,000, you could negotiate to have a payment plan of an extra $100 a month for the next 20 months. 10 months actually, $100 a month for the next 10 months, yes. And so you both agree on that and sign an agreement, and then you go away and that's the rent that you need to pay. If you come back a couple of months later and perhaps this scenario happened when you were actually still able to partially open, and then all of a sudden now with this second lockdown, you know you've had to close, and so your takings have reduced even more, you are able to come back and request additional rent relief. Now, in scenario 2, Fred sent his letter across. Fred's got a fish and chip shop in Melbourne, and he's sent his letter to his landlord. He also pays $1,000 a month in rent, and his takings have reduced by 50% as well, and he's requested that $500 monthly reduction in rent. The landlord's response in this case has taken into account her own financial capacity. She has provided evidence to show that she's a self-funded retiree and that she's using this rent to pay for her living expenses. And so she has suggested a $125 rent waiver and $125 rent deferral. Now, Fred's not happy with this at all, can't pay it. And so that's when you would come to the VSBC for help in resolving your rent dispute. So what you would do is you would actually lodge an application, and on our website we've got an application form there. You need to include a copy of your lease, evidence of that reduction in turnover, either the BAS statement or the record keeping extract from your software, and that you're participating in JobKeeper. And lodge the application. A case officer will then contact you and then talk to the landlord and try and negotiate a rent relief. If it can't be done just by talking to the landlord and talking to the tenant and coming to some arrangement, we will organise a mediation that's conducted by an independent mediator. Now, previous to COVID, we had all our mediations happening in Exhibition Street. However, now they're all done online, so it'll be via a video conference similar to this. And you know, a lot of people say, oh, well, what's a mediation? They don't actually understand what a mediation is. And a lot of people think it's sort of like Judge Judy. He'll stand there, sit there and say, you've got to do this and you've got to do this, and I don't want any arguments. A mediation is a lot different. A mediation is where the mediator will sit both parties down and listen to each side of it and let you come up with a decision. And a good example that I've got is this orange story, I call it. So this father's sitting down watching the footy, and all of a sudden he hears his two sons saying, I want the orange, no, I want the orange, no, I had it first. And he gets up and he grabs a knife and he grabs the orange and he cuts it in half and he says, here, settled. And he goes back to watch the footy, only for both of the boys to burst into tears. And he said, oh, what's wrong now? And one boy says, well, it's your birthday and I wanted to make you a birthday cake and I needed the zest of a whole orange for the birthday cake. So now I can't make you a birthday cake. And the other son says, I wanted to make you your favourite cocktail and I needed the juice of a whole orange. Otherwise the cocktail would be too strong. So now I can't make you your cocktail. So neither boy was happy. What a mediator does is sit both parties down and actually say, what do you need the orange for? And both parties would say, and one of the boys would say, I need the whole one for the zest, and the other, and the mediator would actually come up with a negotiated agreement where one boy would zest the whole orange and give it to the other boy, who would then use the juice. Very simplistic, but that's what happens at a mediation, and that's why we've got such high success rates, because in the terms of the commercial tenancy relief negotiation, the tenant would give their side of the story and the landlord theirs, and they'd come to an agreement. And I heard this lovely story the other day from a mediator who was, it was a pub that was the tenant was a pub, and the landlord come in, and the landlord started first in this mediation and sort of said, you know, oh yeah, you know, you could try doing you know, online takeaway food, you know, why have you got to close completely? I don't think I should have to give you all this money. And then the tenant was there, and he was sitting in his pub with his beanie on and his jacket because it was cold and dark, and he sat there and he said, look, I've tried everything. He said, we're a drinkers pub, we're not a gastro pub. It wasn't working trying to do the meals. He said, it's normally a happy place where everyone comes from the community and have a drink, and that's not happening at the moment. And just by listening to the tenant, the landlord suddenly thought, yes, I think we need to actually help this tenant, and agreed to 85% rent waiver right up until December. So it was a really good story, but it wasn't until a tenant actually could understand the other person's point of view that they were able to resolve it. If we can't resolve it, then the dispute would need to go to VCAT or the courts. So what about those tenants? These are a few questions that I get asked. You know, the tenants who aren't covered, the VSBC is still offering rent resolution. So we've had a number of cases where the tenant isn't in JobKeeper, or it might be over $50 million turnover because of the group structure. They might be in a group with a number of other businesses. But we have still had quite a lot of success trying to negotiating rent relief for businesses that aren't covered from the commercial tenancy relief scheme. So please contact us if you're in that situation. So far, since the 23rd of March, which is really when everything started shutting down and we started getting a lot of inquiries, we've had over 8,600 inquiries and 1,847 rent-related dispute applications. So the vast majority of them are under the commercial tenancy relief scheme. Of those 1,847, we've resolved 760 cases already. 403 have been resolved prior to mediation, so that's just by talking to both parties. And then 334 have been completed at mediation, and we've got a success rate of nearly 90%. So those that come to us, the vast majority of them, we are able to negotiate rent relief for you. It's taking about 6 to 7 weeks to resolve these. So, and what we've found is about 40% of our dispute applications have been from tenants, have been from landlords. And really it's the landlord where the tenant has just stopped paying rent and is not doing anything about it, not contacting the landlord, just not paying rent. And so the landlords are requesting our help, and we are being able to help there, because a tenant can be in breach of their lease if they're not following the process. So if they don't follow the process of providing the evidence of reduction in turnover and that they're eligible lease, that they can be evicted. And unfortunately, I have had to, in a couple of instances, actually provide a certificate to go to VCAT where these tenants, unfortunately, may be evicted. But if you follow the process, if you try and have that negotiation and contact the landlord, you cannot be evicted. And what I'm suggesting is, while you're waiting for the process to go through, pay the rent that you think that you can until you've negotiated that rent relief. So as I just said, a tenant under an eligible lease cannot be evicted for paying rent. So the landlord cannot attempt to enter or recover anything from the premises, and can't attempt to evict the tenant. If that does happen to you, please contact us as soon as possible, because there is a fine associated. I can fine the landlord up to $3,300 for trying to do that, and we would get it stopped. The rent also can't be increased. So a lot of rent lease agreements have a rent increase built into them. So it might be on the 1st of July every year, you know, your rent's going to increase by X amount or X percent. If you've got that in your lease, then you can't have that increase until the end of the time frame. So at the moment, it's the rent can't be increased from the 29th of March through to the 29th of September, and it looks like it won't be able to be increased until the 31st of December. If you are from a non-English speaking background, we've got actually translated into simplified Chinese, Arabic and Vietnamese the fact sheet about all of this information. I had just realised that that this is an older version, and I had a couple of other slides with me that I was going to talk about. So hopefully I've unshared there. And I'm just going to go in and find the latest version. Sorry, just bear with me. It's just because there was a couple of questions that we had, and I had put in an extra couple of slides, and I'm hoping this is the right version. So, yep, it is. Okay, all right. So, oops, share back, sorry. Where are we? Screen here. Okay, all right. All right, so we're on to the right one. Sorry about that, everyone. I've just been given the wrong presentation. The landlord, so I did get a question about what sort of support is available to the landlord. A hardship fund has been announced. So the Victorian government have given $60 million to the commercial landlord hardship fund, and it's already open for application. So what it is it's just for small landlords. So individuals, it's just sole traders, not companies, who are facing hardship after giving rent reduction to their tenants can apply for up to $3,000 per tenancy for this hardship. So you've just got to prove that you've actually given some rent relief. The other part of it is there has been since the 29th of March a 25% reduction on property tax and a deferral of the land tax and a deferral of the remaining land tax. The government has also just announced that landlords who provide their eligible tenants with a rent waiver of 50% over 3 months can receive an additional 25% reduction. So that would mean 50% reduction on their 2020 land tax liability. They've also announced that you know, and this may not impact any of you here, but owners of commercial properties who run their own business and own the property are also being impacted, and they can also apply for a 25% reduction on their land tax and a deferral of the remaining amount as well until the 31st of March 2021. That should be, not 20. So if you are a landlord, there is help available, and that support is all available now. So if you go onto the State Revenue Office website, or even it's on our website as well, but the State Revenue Office is actually administering those. I also get a question about wanting to end the lease. So there's been a lot of tenants and small business owners, unfortunately, who have done the maths and just realised that they're not going to survive, and so they do want to get out of the lease. And so we do get asked about how they would approach the landlord. Unfortunately, the way that a lease is, a lease is a financial contract that you've entered into, and you are obliged to pay rent until the end of the lease, albeit, you can get rent reduction at the moment. But if the tenant contacts the landlord and should try and get agreement to leave the lease early. And we have had some instances where the landlord wants to get the premises back early. And so in a lot of cases that we've seen come through the VSBC, the landlord and the tenant are able to negotiate getting out of that lease early. If the landlord says no, they don't want to break the lease, the tenant needs to advise them that they are breaking the lease, and the landlord must mitigate their loss by trying to release the premise to a new tenant. And if the landlord can't do that, then the tenant has to pay the rent until the lease ends. And so what we've found in some instances is that the landlord requires the tenant to pay a certain amount in lieu of all the lost rent, or we'll keep the security deposit in lieu of some of the lost rent. Okay, we've already done that one. Just very briefly, I just wanted to talk about the other government support. So the Victorian government, and the Australian government have got an awful lot of support out there for small business owners. And look, I know a lot of times people say, oh, we're just going to, to struggle through. I think, my advice would be to take all the available grants and support that you can, because you're really going to need it. And it's great to hear that the city of Whittlesea have also got money to help those small business owners to work on their business, to be able to know what it's like to, this word pivot's been used so often, but how they will be able to change to adapt to the new environment. And on the Business Victoria website, there's a financial assistant advisor, which you can plug in. I'm a sole trader in a regional area, or a sole trader in metropolitan Melbourne, and it will provide you with exactly what sort of support and is available from the Victorian government. And the last thing I did want to talk about very briefly was looking after your own mental health. I know quite often business owners, and especially at the moment, thinking about them, their staff and their family, and putting themselves last. And my advice to you is you've got to keep on top of your own mental health to be able to support both your family and your staff. So make sure that you actually know and do something if you are becoming stressed or anxious. On our website, we have developed a mental health plan, and it's a really good tool. We've got an example there of just being able to make aware of what your stresses are and what your triggers are. I know that, it might be that your stresses are cash flow, or you've got staff and you're not quite sure how you're going to keep them on, or just how you're going to start up again once these restrictions do start to ease. And then look at the triggers, and it might be that, you're waking up every night and can't go back to sleep, or you've got this tight, anxious feeling in your stomach, or you're angry for no reason at all. And if you recognise it and do something then, rather than it getting out of control. I know from myself, when this was all starting and we were having so many disputes and getting all the staff to working from home, it was quite stressful. And I started waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and not being able to get back to sleep. And it was a bit of an aha moment, because I'd done so much with this mental health plan, which we've done in conjunction with Beyond Blue. And I actually thought, oh, this is my stress. This is my indicator that I'm getting too stressed. And, if I don't do something about it, I'll just be a basket case and won't be any good for anyone. And so I made myself get up early every morning. And so now I go for a walk, and just getting out in that fresh air and just sort of seeing other people and being able to say hi from a distance is enough to lift me, that I could actually then go back and sit at my dining room table for the rest of the day and be able to do things. So for you, it might not be going for a walk, but it might. But make sure you do something for yourself, whether it be gardening or cooking or whatever it might be. But that would be one of my real take homes from making sure that your mental health is good. And of course, if you are having any concerns about your mental health or feeling anxious or depressed, please call Beyond Blue. They've got some great counsellors there 24/7 who can give you a lot of tips. And I will now hand it back to you, Rebecca, so that we can take some questions.
Thank you. Sorry, I've just got an echo in my ear. Thank you, Commissioner. So yes, now we'll move on to our Q&A section. Many of you have submitted questions via the registration process, which you would have seen posted in the Q&A section, but please use this opportunity to post any other questions you have for the Commissioner in the Q&A section to the right of the screen. You may need to open the menu to select it. Once you submit it, it will be assessed and posted live, and if we run out of time, your question will be addressed through a direct email to all attendees after the event. So our first question, I think, which was already addressed, but can you make a request for rent relief if you are not on JobKeeper?
Yes, you can. So it won't be considered under the Commercial Tenancy Relief Scheme regulations, but we have found that because the Australian government had a federal code of conduct for negotiating rent relief, part of that was to acknowledge that there had been financial hardship and that both the tenant and landlord should negotiate in good faith. So I think, you know, we've had about over 100 applications for rent relief that aren't covered by the scheme, where people aren't on JobKeeper, and we've still been able to negotiate rent relief for them.
Okay. And there's a question, how can I deal with an evasive and rude real estate agent? Where can I report them? Even after providing all the information as per the COVID-19 omnibus, it has been 6 months and the real estate agent is not helping with the rent relief while stalling the conversation.
Yeah, in that case, I would suggest, Rebecca, that they contact the VSBC and we will follow up, and we will contact that real estate agent and make sure that they respond within that 14 days.
Okay. I negotiated rent relief prior to the second lockdown in good faith. Can I go back and ask again, given the current tougher environment?
Yes, you can. So you're entitled to rent relief for those 6-month period at the moment, and probably till the end of December if it gets through. So if we just talk about this period from March till the end of September, if during the first lockdown you may have negotiated rent relief and had a 50% reduction in your turnover, and now you've had to close completely and you've got 100% or 80% reduction, you can go back and request rent relief again.
Can I ask a landlord to negotiate rental relief beyond September 2020?
Not at the moment, but we will know for sure within the next couple of weeks.
Why are landlords expected to give rent relief but get no support?
There is, as I outlined, there is some support there. So there's a financial hardship of up to $3,000 available to landlords, plus land tax relief of up to 50% and deferral of the rest of it. So yeah, we acknowledge that that landlords are doing it tough in this environment as well, and so that's why that has been made available.
Okay. If a landlord refuses to help out in terms of rent relief, what other negotiating powers do I have? Is it in my right to insist on some sort of rent relief, or am I basically at the mercy of the landlord?
No, the landlord, if you're an eligible tenant, the landlord has to provide rent relief. And if he refuses to help out, you should contact the VSBC and we will do the negotiations on your behalf. It's all free, it doesn't cost you anything. So, you know, if it's causing you anxiety, just give us a call or lodge an application with us.
You have already answered this, but how do I approach a landlord to exit a lease?
Yeah, so I would contact the landlord in writing again and advise that you would like to exit the lease and see what he comes back with. You can suggest a negotiated exit plan in terms of your rent. Again, if you want to exit and you're not having any luck with your landlord, you can come to the VSBC, and under the Retail Leases Act, we will also organise a mediation. And you know, a lot of our mediations, probably about 10% of them at the moment, are about the landlord and tenant sort of trying to negotiate ending the lease. I'll sort of say, and I forgot to say it in here, you know, it's in the landlord's interests at the moment too, to actually, if there's a good tenant and they've had a great business relationship up until now and a really good tenant, it's in the landlord's interest to keep that tenant, because, you know, in this tough environment, there's not that many you know, new businesses starting up. So in a lot of instances, the landlord and the tenant can sort of negotiate either exiting the lease with dignity or that rent reduction.
Okay. What can I do when a tenant just stops paying and refuses to negotiate?
Yeah, we've had, as I said, about 40% of our cases is where the landlord has contacted us because the tenant just doesn't pay. So I suggest the landlord contacts us and we will contact the tenant and make sure that they actually start negotiating rent relief.
Okay. Can we get any grants for this?
I'm not quite sure whether that's for a landlord or a tenant. For the tenant, there's no grant. It's just the rent relief that they're entitled to, and for the tenant, it's just the rent relief, and for the landlord, it's that hardship fund or land tax relief.
Sure. How can we make sure that we do not have to pay for rent, as our business has had 100% loss of income and has been closed since March?
Yeah, that's a real tough one, and I know that you can, as I said, you need to contact the landlord and show that you've had that 100% loss of income, or, you know, if you're one of those businesses that has had to close, and then start negotiating that rent relief. And if they won't, again, come to the VSBC and we'll be able to help you.
How much rent relief am I entitled to at the moment?
So that depends on your loss of turnover. So if your reduction of turnover has been 30%, then you can look at negotiating, you know, a 30% reduction. If your reduction is 70%, you can look at negotiating up to 70%. It depends on the negotiation at the moment between landlord and tenant, and the tenant and the landlord's financial capacity as well.
Okay. Please advise rent relief for new businesses operational in January 2020.
So if you had a lease that was, you had an eligible lease before the 29th of March, you're entitled to rent relief even if you're a new business. So because you haven't got actual figures for how much it would have been, you could perhaps give figures for what you would get a projection of how much you expected your income or your turnover to be for this period, and then again negotiate rent relief on that basis.
Why is the commercial landlord hardship fund only available to individual owners?
Because the sense there was that individual owners don't have. If you're a company, you can't become bankrupt as the company, whereas individuals don't have that that luxury. So it's sort of there just for those individual small sort of landlords that perhaps are struggling themselves.
Okay. If land value is under $250,000, there is no land tax. Is there no land tax?
I'm not an expert on land tax, so that one would have to probably go to the State Revenue Office, so we can take that one on notice and get back.
Okay. What rent relief can I ask past September 2021? So maybe that's March 2021?
I think it's September or 2021. At the moment, you can't. At the moment, the scheme only goes till the 29th of September. However, it's in Parliament at the moment up until the 31st of December 2020. So as of probably, if it goes ahead, now I've got to, this is all if it goes ahead, you would then be entitled to ask for rent relief up until the period of the 31st of December.
Okay, what if I am on month-to-month lease after completing 4 years of term? Am I eligible for rent relief?
I think if you're out of lease, so you're out of your lease contract and it's just a month by month, I would think no, not under the commercial tenancy relief scheme. However, if you're on a month-to-month lease, you can still negotiate with your landlord to reduce that rent. So, the technical answer is you can still try and negotiate rent relief.
My landlord is pushing me to sign a 2-year fixed term lease.
If the question is that on the condition of getting rent relief, I'm being asked to sign a 2-year fixed term lease, then the landlord shouldn't be doing that. It's not negotiable on you signing an additional term on your lease. And again, you should be contacting the VSBC if your landlord's trying to do that.
Okay, I have been paying regular rent since March, but my landlord only offered a waiver for between July and September. Can I claim the waiver for April to May and June too? I paid rent from my pocket without any sales.
So if you can show a reduction in turnover from the period from the 29th of March through to the 29th of September, the landlord needs to take into account all of those times that you're requesting rent relief. So yes, you are entitled to. And again, if you're having trouble getting that, contact us.
I can't continue with current options in coming future. So what can I ask more from the landlord?
I'm sorry, I'm not really understanding. I can't continue with current options in coming future. No, look, I'm sorry, that's a bit vague because I'm not quite sure what the current options that they actually mean there. Is it an option to have a new lease? If it's an option to have a new lease, yeah, look, I'm sorry, I'd have to have more information to answer that question.
Sure. Sorry, just a few there.
Yeah, but what I would say for that one is really just to go through the process that I've said in terms of rent relief, you know, get our template letter and send it off to the landlord.
Sure. If I want to continue as a good tenant, I need some relief from the landlord too. In the coming time, what's my options? Please guide me.
So what you should do is download that letter template from the VSB website, and we'll give the link across to you, Rebecca, from Sydney, so you'll be able to give it to people. And you need to work out what your reduction in turnover is. So and then you need to talk to the landlord about that and what sort of rent relief you want. And hopefully you'll be able to negotiate there. And if you can't, then come to the VSBC and we'll be able to help you.
Sure. And company landlord with land value under $250,000 gets no assistance, their mental health will suffer.
Yeah, I know it's really tough, but I can't comment. It's what the law is. So yep, I know it's it is very hard.
Okay. So I think the options were for the previous question. I can't continue with current rent relief options. What more can I ask of the landlord?
So again, it would depend on your reduction in turnover. So you need what I'd suggest there, because of time and knowing individual circumstances, is that you, if you could ring up the VSBC inquiry line, one of my staff will be able to walk you through exactly what you've got to do there. Or you can email us if that's what you prefer, but we probably need more information about what your reduction of turnover is and what rent relief you're currently getting from your landlord.
Sure. We have no more questions. What I will definitely do is send an email to all attendees who have registered with the details of the VSBC and any further links and any questions that have been answered offline as well. So that's, unless anybody has any other questions, we can finish up. We do have other webinars coming up. So we have next week, running a home-based business, applying for grants, moving your business online, and business continuity. So please keep your eye out for them. I'd like to take this opportunity to extend my thanks to Commissioner Judy O'Connell and the Honourable Bruce Bilson, sorry, for speaking today. And again, please, to the attendees, do reach out to the Economic Development team. We're here to take your calls and we can step you through any assistance that you may need. Thank you again and have a great afternoon.
Thanks a lot. Bye.